Here we are once again. So it turns out my throat is kind of hurting for today. So I figured we might as well just take it nice and easy. Just some nice, plain reading for tonight to help everyone relax and have a wonderful rest of their night. Hopefully you're doing well. Have I had tea? We'll get there. I'll have some before bed, because occasionally when I have trouble sleeping, I do like to have a sleepy time tea. And that should probably help at least a bit, to soothe a bit more. So, no worries, I'll be okay. Tea is the best for a sore throat, and that is the tried and tested truth. Although I have been known to have many, many cough drops and Ricolas. But that is usually when I'm sick. Although, it is kind of in the season for people to be sick. And there's quite a few people at work. I'll be careful. You're about to take a nap, so lovely timer? Hey, that's what I'm here for. So, let's get into it to help you relax, shall we? Glasses on, pipe out, and I think I'd like to begin with Chapter 2 of the Pawn of Prophecy for today. Just because I like reading my favorite book. And if we finish it and there's still time, I'll move on to another one of our options. Sounds good? Sounds good, probably. Here we go. Chapter 2. Why am I streaming? Because it's fun. Not long after, in the endless noon of Garion's boyhood, the storyteller appeared once again at the gate of Falders's farm. This is rest solar, at least for me. Would I rather watch a tree grow or a knee grow? Oh, yep, I have been trolled. Honestly, the bee's knees are interesting, but you got me. Go ahead and we'll just do that for now. YouTube chat is quite interesting, I guess. The storyteller, who seemed not to have a proper name as other men did, was a thoroughly disreputable old man. The knees of his hose were patched, and his mismatched shoes were out at the toes. His long-sleeved woolen tunic was belted about the waist with a piece of rope, and his hood, a curious garment not normally worn in that part of Sindaria, and one which Garion thought quite fine, with its loosely fitting yoke covering shoulders, back, and chest, was spotted and soiled with spilled food and drink. Only his full cloak seemed relatively new. The old storyteller's white hair was cropped quite close, as was his beard. His face was strong, with a kind of angularity to it, and his features provided no clue to his background. He did not resemble a Rend, nor Cherek, Algar, nor Draznian, Riven, nor Tolnedrin, but seemed rather to derive from some racial stock long since forgotten. His eyes were a deep and merry blue, forever young and forever full of mischief. The storyteller appeared from time to time at Valders's farm, and was always welcome. He was in truth a rootless vagabond who made his way in the world by telling stories. His stories were not always new, but there was in his telling of them a special kind of magic. His voice could roll like thunder, or hush down into a zephyr-like whisper. He could imitate the voices of a dozen men at once, whistle so like a bird that the birds themselves would come to hear him for what he had to say. And when he imitated the howl of a wolf, the sound could raise the hair on the backs of his listeners' necks and strike a chill into their hearts like the depths of a Draznian winter. You're sad? You need to buy new necklaces? Your pendant broke? I'm sorry. That is very rough, especially when it comes to favorite accessories. That reminds me, I do have to get a replacement for a chain of mine. Oh, you. I do have a fun pendant for myself that did have its chain break. So, I can relate. He could make the sound of rain and of wind, and even, most miraculously, the sound of snow falling. His stories were filled with sounds that made them come alive, and through the sounds and the words with which he wove the tales, sight and smell, and the very feel of strange times and places seemed also to come to life for his spellbound listeners. Sounds like a very good storyteller, honestly. Would that I could achieve such heights. But then again, we'll learn more about him. All of this wonder he gave freely in exchange for a few meals, a few tankards of ale, and a warm spot in the hay barn in which to sleep. He roamed about the world seemingly as free of possessions as the birds. Between the storyteller and Aunt Pole, there seemed to be a sort of hidden recognition. She had always viewed his coming with a kind of wry acceptance, knowing, it seemed, that the ultimate treasures of her kitchen were not safe as long as he lurked in the vicinity. Loaves and cakes had a way of disappearing when he was around, and his quick knife, always ready, could neatly divest the most carefully prepared goose of a pair of drumsticks and a generous slab of breast meat with 3 swift slices when her back was turned. She called him Old Wolf, and his appearance at the gate of Valders's farm marked the resumption of a contest which had obviously been going on for years. He flattered her outrageously even as he stole from her. Offered cookies or dark brown bread, he would politely refuse, and then steal half a plateful before the platter had moved out of his reach. Her beer pantry and wine cellar might as well have been delivered into his hands immediately upon his appearance at the gate. He seemed to delight in pilferage, and if she watched him with a steely eye, he found quite easily a dozen confederates willing to sack her kitchen in exchange for a single story. Lamentably, Among his most able pupils was the boy Garion, often driven to distraction by the necessity of watching at once an old thief and a fledgling one. Aunt Pole would arm herself with a broom and drive them both from her kitchen with hard words and resounding blows. And the old storyteller, laughing, would flee with the boy to some secluded place where they would feast upon the fruits of their pilferage, and the old man, tasting frequent from a flagon of stolen wine or beer, would regale his student with stories out of the dim past. The best stories, of course, were saved for the dining hall, when, after the evening meal was over and the plates had been pushed back, the old man would rise from his place and carry his listeners off into a world of magical enchantment. "Tell us of the beginnings, my old friend," Balder, always pious, said one evening, "and of the gods." You're playing Homie Cypher while you're listening to this, and you're sitting between jump scares and being lulled. Over here, I'm just the save theme. You know, anytime you play a horror game and you go into the save room and you hear such soft and relaxing music, maybe not the most relaxing, but you're in the eye of the storm. You're safe for now. But sooner or later, you'll have to go back out. Honestly, music in horror games is so beautiful. Well, I'm glad you think so. Certainly hope so. That is kind of what I want. A nice, calm, safe spot to relax for a bit before we move on with whatever trials life has for us next. Of the beginnings and the gods, the old man mused. A worthy subject, Valder, but a dry and dusty one. I've noticed that you find all subjects dry and dusty, old wolf, Aunt Pole said, going to the barrel and drawing off a tankard of foamy beer for him. He accepted the tankard with a stately bow. It's one of the hazards of my profession, Mistress Pole, he explained. He drank deeply, then set the tankard aside. He lowered his head and thought for a moment, then looked directly, or so it seemed, at Garion. And then he did a strange thing which he had never done before when telling stories in Falders's dining hall. He drew his cloak about him and rose to his full height. "Behold," he said, his voice rich and sonorous, "at the beginnings of days made the gods the world and the seas, and the dry land also, and cast they the stars across the night sky, and did set the sun and his wife the moon in the heavens to give light unto the world. And the gods caused the earth to bring forth the beasts, and the waters to bud with fish, and the skies to flower with birds. And they made men also, and divided men into peoples. Now the gods were 7 in number, and were all equal, and their names were Belar, and Chaldan, and Nedra, and Issa, and Mara, and Alder, and Torak." Gary knew the story, of course. Everyone in that part of Sindaria was familiar with it, since the story was of a Lorn origin, and the lands on the 3 sides of Sindaria were Lorn kingdoms. Though the tale was familiar, however, he had never before heard it told in such a way. His mind soared, as in his imagination The gods themselves strode the world in those dim, misty days when the world was first made, and a chill came over him at each mention of the forbidden name of Tarak. He listened intently as the storyteller described how each god selected a people. For Belar the Alorns, for Issa the Niasans, for Chaldan the Arens, for Nedra the Tolnedrans, for Mara the Marags, which are no more, and for Tarak the Angaraks. And he heard how the god Alder dwelt apart and considered the stars in his solitude, and how some very few men he accepted as pupils and disciples. Garion glanced at the others who were listening. Their faces were rapt with attention. Durnix's eyes were wide, and old Kralto's hands were clasped on the table in front of him. Alder's face was pale, and tears stood in his eyes. Aunt Pole stood at the rear of the room. Though it was not cold, she too had drawn her mantle about her and stood very straight, her eyes intent. And it came to pass, the storyteller continued, that the god Alder caused to be made a jewel in the shape of a globe, and behold, in the jewel was captured the light of certain stars that did glitter in the northern sky, and great was the enchantment upon the jewel, which men called the Orb of Alder. For with the orb could Alder see that which had been, that which was, and that which was yet to be. Garion realized he was holding his breath, for he was now completely caught up in the story. He listened in wonder as Tarak stole the orb from the other gods and made war upon him. Tarak used the orb to sunder the earth and let in the sea to drown the land, until the orb struck back against misuse by melting the left side of his face and destroying his left hand and eye. The old man paused and drained his tankard, and Pole, with her mantle still close about her, brought him another, her movements somehow stately and her eyes burning. I've never heard the story told so, Durnix said softly. It's the Book of Alorn. It's only told in the presence of kings, Kralto said, just as softly. I knew a man once who had heard it at the king's court at Sendar, and he remembered some of it. I've never heard it all before, though. The story continued, recounting how Belgarath the sorcerer led Tarak and his 3 sons to regain the orb 2,000 years later, and how the western lands were settled and guarded against the hosts of Tarak. The gods removed from the world, leaving Riva to safeguard the orb in his fortress on the Isle of the Winds. There he forged a great sword and set the orb in its hilt. While the orb remained there, and the line of Riva sat on the throne, Tarak could not prevail. Then Belgarath sent his favorite daughter to Riva to be a mother to kings, while his other daughter remained with him and learned his art, for the mark of the sorcerers was upon her. The old storyteller's voice was now very soft, and his ancient tale drew its close. And between them, he said, did Belgarath and his daughter, the sorceress Polgara, set enchantments to keep watch against the coming of Tarak. And some men say they shall abide against his coming, even though it be until the very end of days. For it is prophesied that one day shall maim Tarak come against the kingdoms of the west to reclaim the orb which he so dearly purchased, and battle shall be joined between Tarak and the fruit of the line of Riva, and in that battle shall be decided the fate of the world. And then the old man fell silent and let his mantle drop from about his shoulders, signifying that his story was at an end. There was a long silence in the hall, broken only by a few faint sputters from the dying fire and the endless songs of frogs and crickets in the summer night outside. Finally, Balder cleared his throat and rose, his bench scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "You have done us much honor tonight, my old friend," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is an event we will remember all our lives. You have told us a kingly story, not usually wasted on ordinary people." The old man grinned then, his blue eyes twinkling. "I haven't consorted with many kings of late, Balder," he laughed. "They all seem to be too busy to listen to the old tales, and a story must be told from time to time if it's not to be lost. Besides, who knows these days where a king might be hiding?" They all laughed at that and began to push back their benches, for it was growing late and time for those who must be up in the first light of the sun to seek their beds. Like me. "Will you carry a lantern for me to the place where I sleep, boy?" the storyteller asked Garion. "Gladly," Garion said, jumping up and running into the kitchen. He fetched down a square glass lantern, lighted the candle inside it from one of the banked kitchen fires, and went back to the dining hall. Balder was speaking with the storyteller. As he turned away, Garion saw a strange look pass between the old man and Aunt Pole, who still stood at the back of the hall. "Are you ready then, boy?" the old man asked as Garion came up to him. "Whenever you are," Garion replied, and the two of them turned and left the hall. "Why's the story unfinished?" Garion asked, bursting with curiosity. "Why did you stop before we found out what happened when Tarak met the Riven King?" "That's another story," the old man explained. "Will you tell it to me sometime?" Garion pressed. The old man laughed. "Tarak and the Riven King haven't as yet met," he said, "so I can't very well tell it, can I? At least, not until after their meeting." "It's only a story," Garion objected. "Isn't it?" "Is it?" The old man removed a flagon of wine from under his tunic and took a long drink. Who's to say what's only a story and what's truth disguised as a story? "It's only a story," Garion said stubbornly, suddenly feeling very hard-headed and practical, like any good Sendar. "It can't really be true. Why, Belgarath the sorcerer would be I don't know how old, and people don't live that long." 7,000 years, the old man said. "What?" "Belgarath the sorcerer is 7,000 years old, perhaps a bit older." "That's impossible," Garion said. "Is it? How old are you?" 9, next Aristide. "And in 9 years you've learned everything that's both possible and impossible? You're a remarkable boy, Garion." Garion flushed. "Well," he said, somehow not quite so sure of himself, "the oldest man I ever met is old Weldrick over on Mildred's farm. Ernick says he's over 90, and that he's the oldest man in the district." "And it's a very big district, of course," the old man said solemnly. "How old are you?" Garion asked, not wanting to give up. "Old enough, boy," the old man said. "But still only a story." "Many good and solid men would say so," the old man told him, looking up at the stars. "Good men who will live out their lives believing only in what they can see and touch. But there's a world beyond what we can see and touch, and that world lives by its own laws. What may be impossible in this very ordinary world is very possible there, and sometimes the boundaries between the two worlds disappear, and then who can say what's possible and impossible? I think I'd rather live in the ordinary world, Garion said. The other one sounds too complicated. You don't always have that choice, Garion, the storyteller told him. Don't be too surprised if that other world someday chooses you to do something that must be done. Some great and noble thing. Me? Garion said incredulously. Stranger things have happened. Go to bed, boy. I think I'll look at the stars for a while. Stars and I are very old friends. Stars? Garion asked, looking up involuntarily. You're a very strange old man, if you don't mind my saying so. Indeed, the storyteller agreed. Quite the strangest you'll likely meet. I like you all the same, Garion said quickly, not wanting to give offense. That's a comfort, boy, the old man said. Now, go to bed. Your Aunt Pole will be worried about you. Later, as he slept, Garion's dreams were troubled. The dark figure of Mame Torak loomed in the shadows, and monstrous things pursued him across twisted landscapes where the possible and the impossible merged and joined as that other world reached out to claim him. And that is the end of Chapter 2. Honestly, I got through that a lot quicker than I thought I would. Yeah. We'll do another chapter. Maybe even 2 at this rate. Some few mornings later, when Aunt Pole had begun to scowl at his continued lurking in her kitchen, the old man made excuse of some errand to the nearby village of Upper Gralt. Good, Aunt Pole said, somewhat ungraciously. At least my pantries will be safe while you're gone. He bowed mockingly, his eyes twinkling. Do you need anything, Mistress Pole? He asked. Some trifling things I might purchase for you, as long as I'm going anyway. Aunt Pole thought a moment. Some of my spice pots are a bit low, she said, and there's a Tolnedran spice merchant in Fennel Lane, just south of the town tavern. I'm sure you'll have no trouble finding the tavern. The trip's likely to be dry, the old man admitted pleasantly, and lonely too. 10 leagues with no one to talk to is a long way. Talk to the birds, Aunt Pole suggested bluntly. Birds listen well enough, the old man said, but their speech is repetitious and quickly grows tiresome. Why don't I take the boy along for company? Garion held his breath. He's picking up enough bad habits on his own, Aunt Pole said tartly. I'd prefer not having an expert instruction. Why, Mistress Pole, the old man objected, stealing a cruller almost absently. You do me an injustice. Besides, a change will do the boy good. Broaden his horizons, you might say. His horizons are quite broad enough, thank you, she said. Garion's heart sank. Still, she continued, at least I can count on him not to forget my spices altogether, or to become so fuddled with ale that he confuses peppercorns with cloves or cinnamon with nutmeg. Very well, take the boy along, but mind, I don't want you taking him into any low or disreputable places. Mistress Pole, the old man said, feigning shock, would I frequent such places? I know you too well, old wolf, she said dryly. You take to vice and corruption as naturally as a duck takes to a pond. If I hear that you've taken the boy into any unsavory place, you and I will have words. Then I'll have to make sure you don't hear of anything like that, won't I? And Paul gave him a hard look. I'll see which spices I need, she said. And I'll borrow a horse and cart from Falder, the old man said, stealing another cruller. In a surprisingly short time, Garion and the old man were bouncing along the rutted road to Upper Gralt behind a fast-trotting horse. It was a bright summer morning, and there were a few dandelion puff clouds in the sky and deep blue shadows under the hedgerows. After a few hours, however, the sun became hot and the jolting ride became tiresome. Are we almost there? Garion asked for a third time. Not for some time yet, the old man said. 10 leagues is a goodly distance. I was there once before, Garion told him, trying to sound casual. Of course, I was only a child at the time, so I don't remember too much about it. It seemed to be quite a fine place. The old man shrugged. It's a village, he said, much like any other. He seemed a bit preoccupied. Garion, hoping to nudge the old man into a story to make the miles go faster, began asking questions. Why is it that you don't have a name, if I'm not being impolite in asking? I have many names, the old man said, scratching his white beard. Almost as many names as I have years. I've only got one, Garion said. So far. What? You only have one name so far, the old man explained. In time you may get another, or even several. Some people collect names as they go along through their lives. Sometimes names wear out, just like clothes. Aunt Pole calls you Old Wolf, Garion said. I know, the old man said. Your Aunt Pole and I have known each other for a very long time. Why does she call you that? Who can say why a woman such as your aunt does anything? May I call you Mr. Wolf? Garion asked. Names were quite important to Garion, and the fact that the old storyteller did not seem to have one had always bothered him. The namelessness had made the old man seem somehow incomplete, unfinished. The old man looked at him soberly for a moment, and then he burst out laughing. Mr. Wolf indeed. How very appropriate. I think I like that name better than any I've had in years. May I then? Garion asked. Call you Mr. Wolf, I mean. I think I'd like that, Garion. I think I'd like that very much. Now would you please tell me a story, Mr. Wolf? Garion asked. The time and distance went by much faster than, as Mr. Wolf wove for Garion tales of glorious adventure and dark treachery taken from those gloomy, unending centuries of the Arendish civil wars. Why are the Arends like that? Garion asked, after a particularly grim tale. The Arends are very noble, Wolf said, lounging back in the seat of the cart with the reins held negligently in one hand. Nobility is a trait that's not always trustworthy, since it sometimes causes men to do things for obscure reasons. Gunderig's an Arend, Garion said. He sometimes seems to be, well, not too quick of thought, if you know what I mean. It's the effect of all that nobility, Wolf said. Arends spend so much time concentrating on being noble that they don't have time to think of other things. They came over to the crest of a long hill, and there in the next valley lay the village of Upper Gralt. To Garion, The tiny cluster of gray stone houses with slate roofs seemed disappointingly small. Two roads, white with thick dust, intersected there, and there were a few narrow winding streets besides. The houses were square and solid, but seemed almost like toys set down in the valley below. The horizon beyond was ragged with the mountains of eastern Sindaria, and, though it was summer, the tops of most of the mountains were still wrapped in snow. Their tired horse plodded down the hill toward the village, his hooves stirring little clouds of dust with each step, and soon they were clattering along the cobblestone streets towards the center of the village. Hey there, Green Apple. Good to see you. Come on in. Make yourself nice and cozy. The villagers, of course, were all too important to pay any attention to an old man and a small boy in a farm cart. The women wore gowns and high pointed hats, and the men wore doublets and soft velvet caps. Hi, Jam Jam. Welcome in. Good to see you. There, I'm here. Their expressions seemed haughty, and they looked down with obvious disdain at the few farmers in town who respectfully stood aside to let them pass. We're about 40 minutes in. We have a good while yet. About an hour 20. Because unfortunately, I still have to work tomorrow. Wait, what day is it? It's Tuesday. Oh no. Oh boy. I have things I need to take care of tomorrow. I'll be here, of course, but there's a work party coming up soon, and I did say I was going to bring little bunt cakes, buntlets as they're referred to, and I have to make sure I get the flavors everyone wants. You were just about to go to sleep, but you saw me streaming? Well then, you came at the perfect time for stories, to hopefully lull you to sleep. That's the goal, by the way. Rest and relaxation. So, now that I've remembered what day it is today, let's continue on with the story, shall we? Their expressions seemed haughty, and they looked down with obvious disdain at the few farmers in town who respectfully stood aside to let them pass. They're very fine, aren't they? Garion observed. They seem to think so, Wolf said, his expression faintly amused. I think it's time that we found something to eat, don't you? Though he had not realized it until the old man mentioned it, Garion was suddenly ravenous. Where can we go? He asked. They all seem so splendid. Would any of them let strangers sit at their tables? Wolf laughed and shook a jingling purse at his waist. We shouldn't have any trouble making acquaintances, he said. There are places where one can buy food. Did you miss the Odyssey? No. I saved that just in case you came by. We'll finish this chapter pretty soon, probably, and then we'll start to read it. Buy food? Garion had never heard of such a thing before. Anyone who appeared at Falders's gate at mealtime was invited to the table as a matter of course. The world of the villagers was obviously very different from the world at Falders's farm. I, I don't have any money, he objected. I've got enough for both of us, Wolf assured him, stopping their horse before a large, low building with a sign bearing a picture of a cluster of grapes hanging just above its door. There were words on the sign, but of course, Garion could not read them. What do the words say, Mr. Wolf? He asked. They say that food and drink can be bought inside, Wolf told him, getting down from the cart. It must be a fine thing to be able to read, Garion said wistfully. The old man looked at him, seemingly surprised. You can't read, boy? He asked incredulously. I've never found anyone to teach me, Garion said. Falder reads, I think, but no one else at the farm knows how. Nonsense, Wolf snorted. I'll speak to your aunt about it. She's been neglecting her responsibility. She should have taught you to read years ago. Can Aunt Pole read? Garion asked, stunned. Of course she can, Wolf said, leading the way into the tavern. She says she finds little advantage in it, but she and I had that particular argument out many years ago. The old man seemed quite upset at Garion's lack of education. Garion, however, was far too interested in the smoky interior of the tavern to pay much attention. The room was large and dark, with a low beamed ceiling and a stone floor strewn with rushes. Though it was not cold, a fire burned in a stone pit in the center of the room, and the smoke rose errantly towards a chimney set above it on 4 square stone pillars. Tallow candles guttered in clay dishes on several of the long stained tables, and there was a reek of wine and stale beer in the air. What have you to eat? Wolf demanded of a sour, unshaven man with a grease-spotted apron. We've a bit of joint left, the man said, pointing at a spit roast resting to one side of the fire pit. Roasted only day before yesterday, and a meat porridge fresh yesterday morning, and bread no more than a week old. Very well, Wolf said, sitting down. I'll have a pot of your best ale, and milk for the boy. Milk? Garion protested. Milk, Wolf said firmly. You have the money? The sour-looking man demanded. Wolf jingled his purse, and the sour man looked suddenly less sour. Why is that man over there sleeping? Garion asked, pointing at the snoring villager sitting with his head down in one of the tables. Drunk, Wolf said, scarcely glancing at the snoring man. Shouldn't someone take care of him? He'd rather not be taken care of. You know him? I know of him, Wolf said, and many others like him. I've occasionally been in that condition myself. Why? It seemed appropriate at the time. The roast was dry and overdone, the meat porridge was thin and watery, and the bread was stale, but Garion was too hungry to notice. He carefully cleaned his plate as he had been taught, then sat as Mr. Wolf lingered over a second pot of ale. Quite splendid, he said, more to be saying something than out of any real conviction. All in all, he found that Upper Gralt did not live up to his expectations. Adequate, Wolf shrugged. Village taverns are much the same the world over. I've seldom seen one I'd hurry to visit. Shall we go? He laid down a few coins, which the sour-looking man snatched up quickly, and led Garion back out into the afternoon sunlight. Let's find your aunt's spice merchant, he said, and then see to a night's lodging and a stable for our horse. They set off down the street, leaving horse and cart beside the tavern. The house of the Tolnedran spice merchant was a tall, narrow building in the next street. 2 swarthy, thick-bodied men in short tunics lounged in the street at his front door near a fierce-looking black horse wearing a curious armored saddle. The two men stared with dull eyes disinterested at passerbys in the lane. Mr. Wolf stopped when he caught sight of them. Is something wrong? Garion asked. Thulls, Wolf said quietly, looking hard at the two men. What? Those two are Thulls, the old man said. They usually work as porters for the Murgos. What are Murgos? The people of Cthulhu Murgos, Wolf said shortly. Southern Angarax. The ones we beat at the Battle of Vomimbre? Garion asked. Why would they be here? The Murgos have taken up commerce, Wolf said, frowning. I hadn't expected to see one of them in so remote a village. We may as well go in. The Thulls have seen us, and it might look strange if we turned now and went back. Stay close to me, boy, and don't say anything. They walked past the two heavy-set men and entered the spice merchant's shop. The Tolnedron was a thin, bald-headed man wearing a brown belted gown that reached to the floor. He was nervously weighing several packets of pungent-smelling powder, which lay on the counter before him. Good day to you, he said to Wolf. Please, have patience. I'll be with you shortly. He spoke with a slight lisp that Garion found peculiar. No hurry, Wolf said in a wheezy, cracking voice. Garion looked at him sharply and was astonished to see that his old friend was stooped and that his head was nodding foolishly. See to their needs, the other man in the shop said shortly. He was a dark, burly man wearing a chainmail shirt and a short sword belted to his waist. His cheekbones were high, and there were several savage-looking scars on his face. His eyes looked curiously angular, and his voice was haunted. No hurry, Wolf said in his wheezy cackle. My business here will take some time, the Murgo said coldly, and I prefer not to be rushed. Tell the merchant here what you need, old man. My thanks, then, Wolf cackled. I have a list somewhere about me. He began to fumble foolishly in his pockets. My master drew it up. I do hope you can read it, friend merchant, for I cannot. He finally found the list and presented it to the Tolnedron. The merchant glanced at the list. This'll only take a moment, he told the Murgo. The Murgo nodded and stood stonily at Wolf and Garion. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his expression changed. You're a seemly appearing boy, he said to Garion. What's your name? Until that moment in his entire life, Garion had been an honest and truthful boy, but Wolf's manner had opened before his eyes an entire world of deception and subterfuge. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he seemed to hear a warning voice, a dry, calm voice advising him that the situation was dangerous, and that he should take steps to protect himself. He hesitated only a moment before telling his first deliberate lie. He allowed his mouth to droop open and his face to assume an expression of vacant-headed stupidity. Runderig, Your Honor, he mumbled. An horrendous name, the Murgo said, his eyes narrowing even more. You don't look like an Arend. Garion gaped at him. Are you an Arend, Runderig? The Murgo pressed. Garion frowned, as if struggling with a thought while his mind raced. The dry voice suggested several alternatives. My father was, he said finally, but my mother's a Centaur, and people say I favor her. You say was, the Murgo said quickly. Is your father dead, then? His scarred face was intent. Garion nodded foolishly. The tree-cutting a tree he was cutting fell on him, he lied. It was a long time ago. Murgo suddenly seemed to lose interest. Here's a copper penny for you, boy, he said, indifferently tossing a small coin on the floor at Garion's feet. It has the likeness of the god Torak stamped on it. Perhaps it will bring you luck, or at least more wit. Wolf stooped quickly and retrieved the coin. But the coin he handed to Garion was a common Sindarian penny. Thank the good man, Rundarig, he wheezed. Why, thanks, your honor, Garion said, concealing the penny tightly in his fist. The Murgo shrugged and looked away. Wolf paid the Tolnetran merchant for the spices, and he and Garion left the shop. You played a dangerous game, boy, Wolf said once they were out of earshot of the two lounging Tholes. You seem not to want him to know who we were, Garion explained. I wasn't sure why, but I thought I ought to do the same. Was what I did wrong? You're very quick, Wolf said approvingly. I think we managed to deceive the Murgo. Why did you change the coin? Garion asked. Sometimes Angarek coins aren't what they seem, Wolf said. It's better for you not to have any of them. Let's fetch our horse and cart. It's a long way back to Falder's farm. I thought we were going to take lodgings for the night. That's changed now. Come along, boy. It's time for us to leave. The horse was very tired, and he moved slowly up the long hill out of Upper Gralt as the sun went down ahead of them. Why wouldn't you let me keep the Angarek penny, Mr. Wolf? Garion persisted. The subject still puzzled him. There are many things in this world that seem to be one thing, but are in fact another, Wolf said somewhat grimly. I don't trust Angareks, and I particularly don't trust Murgos. It'd be just as well, I think, if you never had anything in your possession that bears the likeness of Torak. The war between the West and the Angareks has been over for 500 years now, Garion objected. All men say so. Not all men, Wolf said. Now take that rope out of the back of the cart and cover up. Your aunt would never forgive me if I let you take a chill. I will if you think I should, Garion said, but I'm not a bit cold and not at all sleepy. I'll keep you company as we go. That'll be a comfort, boy, Wolf said. Mr. Wolf, Garion said after some time, did you know my father and mother? Yes, Wolf said quietly. My father's dead too, isn't he? I'm afraid so. Garion sighed deeply. I thought so, he said. I wish I'd known them. Aunt Pole says I was only a baby when... He couldn't bring himself to say it. I've tried to remember my mother, but I can't. You were very small, Wolf said. What were they like? Garion asked. Wolf scratched at his beard. Ordinary, he said. So ordinary, you wouldn't look twice at either one of them. Garion was offended by that. Aunt Pole says my mother was very beautiful, he objected. She was. Then how can you say she was ordinary? She wasn't prominent or important, Wolf said. Neither was your father. Anyone who saw them thought they were just simple village people. A young man with a young wife and their baby. That's all anyone ever saw. That's all anyone was supposed to see. I don't understand. It's very complicated. What was my father like? Medium size, Wolf said. Dark hair. Very serious young man. I liked him. Did he love my mother? More than anything. And me? Of course. What kind of place did they live in? It was a small place, Wolf said. a little village near the mountains, a long way away from any main roads. They had a cottage at the end of the street. It was a small, solid little house. Your father built it himself. He was a stone cutter. I used to stop by there once in a while when I was in the neighborhood. The old man's voice droned on, describing the village and the house and the two who lived there. Arian listened, not even realizing it, when he fell asleep. It must have been very late, almost on toward dawn. In a half-drowse, the boy felt himself lifted from the cart and carried up a flight of stairs. The old man was surprisingly strong. Aunt Pole was there. He knew that without even opening his eyes. There was a particular scent about her that he could have found in a dark room. "Just cover him up," Mr. Wolf said softly to Aunt Pole. "Best not to wake him just now." "What happened?" Aunt Pole asked, her voice as soft as the old man's. "There was a Murgo in town, at your spice merchant's. He asked questions, and he tried to give the boy an Angarek penny." "An upper Grault? Are you certain he was only a Murgo?" "It's impossible to tell. Not even I can distinguish between Murgo and Grolum with any certainty." "What happened to the coin?" "I was quick enough to get it. I gave the boy a Sindarian penny instead. If our Murgo was a Grolum, we'll let him follow me. I'm sure I can give him several months of entertainment." "You'll be leaving then?" Aunt Pole's voice seemed somehow sad. "It's time," Wolf said. "Right now the boy's safe enough here, and I must be abroad. There are things afoot I must see to. When Murgos begin to appear in remote places, I begin to worry. We have a great responsibility and a great care placed upon us, and we mustn't allow ourselves to become careless." "Will you be gone long?" Aunt Pole asked. "Some years, I expect. There are many things I must look into, and many people I'll have to see." "I'll miss you," Aunt Pole said softly. He laughed. "Sentimentality, Pole," he said dryly. "That's hardly in character." "You know what I mean. I'm not suited for this task you and the others have given me. What do I know about the raising of small boys?" "You're doing well," Wolf said. "Keep the boy close, and don't let his nature drive you into hysterics. Be careful. He lies like a champion." "Arian?" Her voice was shocked. He lied to the Murgo so well that even I was impressed. "Arian." "He's also started asking questions about his parents," Wolf said. "How much have you told him?" "Very little. Only that they're dead. Let's leave it at that for now. There's no point in telling him things he isn't old enough to cope with yet." Their voices went on, but Garion drifted off into sleep again, and he was almost sure that it was all a dream. But the next morning when he awoke, Mr. Wolf was gone. And that is the end of Chapter 3. With that, I'm going to take a small break, and then we'll go ahead and get into the next part of the Odyssey. So, if you'd like, take this time to get some water, or maybe a little bathroom break or a stretch, and I will be right back. There we go. Hello, hello. I'm back. Thank you, Green Apple. My throat still seems to be a bit okay. So yeah, should be good to keep on going through the night. So, I hope you're all doing well, that you're all taking care of yourselves, and that you're all having a wonderful night. And that you've had a good day. If you haven't, though, hopefully this at least helps a little. I hope you've all eaten today, too. No worries. I'm keeping my voice in my comfortable range. That way, I don't strain it or hurt it more. Luckily, I do have a very good understanding of where my voice is good and where it kind of hurts to keep going. So, I'll be okay. And we'll have some tea afterwards. Alright. Let us begin with Book 2 of the Odyssey, Assembly of the People of Ithaca. Speeches of Telemachus and of the suitors. And Telemachus makes his preparations and starts for Pylos with Minerva, disguised as Mentor. Now, when the child of morning, rosy-fingered dawn, appeared, Telemachus rose and dressed himself. He bound his sandals on to his comely feet, girded his sword about his shoulder, and left his room looking like an immortal god. He at once set the criers round to call the people in assembly. So they called them, and the people gathered thereon. Then, when they were got together, he went to the place of assembly spear in hand, not alone, for his 2 hounds went with him. Minerva endowed him with a presence of such divine comeliness that all marveled at him as he went by. And when he took his place in his father's seat, even the oldest counselors made way for him. Egyptius, a man bent double with age and of infinite experience, was the first to speak. His son Antiphus had gone with Ulysses to Ilius, land of noble steeds, but the savage Cyclops had killed him when they were all shut up in the cave, and had cooked his last dinner for him. He had 3 sons left, of whom 2 still worked on their father's land, while the third, Eurynomus, was one of the suitors. Nevertheless, their father could not get over the loss of Antiphus, and was still weeping for him when he began his speech. "Men of Ithaca," he said, "hear my words. From the day Ulysses left us, there has been no meeting of our counselors until now. Who then can it be, whether old or young, that finds it so necessary to convene us? Has he got wind of some host approaching, and does he wish to warn us? Or would he speak upon some other matter of public moment? I am sure he is an excellent person, and I hope Jove will grant him his heart's desire." Telemachus took the speech as of good omen, and rose at once, for he was bursting with what he had to say. He stood in the middle of the assembly, and the good herald Pisanor had brought him his staff. Then, turning to Egyptius, "Sir," said he, "it is I, as you will shortly learn, who have convened you, for it is I who am the most aggrieved. I have not got wind of any host approaching about which I would warn you, nor is there any matter of public moment on which I would speak. My grievance is purely personal, and turns on two great misfortunes which have fallen upon my house. The first of these is the loss of my excellent father, who was chief among all you here present, and was like a father to every one of you. The second is much more serious, and ere long will be the utter ruin of my estate. The sons of all the chief men among you are pestering my mother to marry them against her will. They are afraid to go to her father Icarius, asking him to choose the one he likes best, and to provide marriage gifts for his daughter. But day by day, they keep hanging about my father's house, sacrificing our oxen, sheep, and fat goats for their banquets, and never giving so much as a thought to the quantity of wine they drink. No estate can stand such recklessness. We have now no Ulysses to ward off harm from our doors, and I cannot hold my own against them. I shall never, all my days, be as good a man as he was. Still, I would indeed defend myself if I had the power to do so, for I cannot stand such treatment any longer. My house is being disgraced and ruined. Have respect, therefore, to your own consciences and to public opinion. Fear, too, the wrath of heaven, lest the gods should be displeased and turn upon you. I pray you by Jove and Themis, who was the beginning and the end of councils, do not hold back, my friends, and leave me single-handed, unless it be that my brave father Ulysses did some wrong to the Achaeans, which you would now avenge on me by aiding and abetting these suitors. Moreover, if I am to be eaten out of house and home at all, I had rather you did the eating yourselves, for I could then take action against you to some purpose, and serve you with notices from house to house till I got paid in full, whereas now I have no remedy. With this, Telemachus dashed his staff to the ground and burst into tears. Everyone was very sorry for him, but they all sat still, and no one ventured to make him angry answer save only Antinius, who spoke thus. Telemachus, insolent braggart that you are, how dare you try to throw the blame upon the suitors? It is your mother's fault, not ours, for she is a very artful woman. This 3 years past, and close on 4, she had been driving us out of our minds by encouraging each one of us, and sending him messages without meaning one word of what she says. And then there was that other trick she played us. She set up a great tambour frame in her room, and began to work on an enormous piece of fine needlework. Sweethearts, said she, Ulysses is indeed dead. Still, do not press me to marry again immediately. Wait, for I would not have the skill in needlework perish unrecorded, till I have completed a pall for the hero Laertes, to be in readiness against the time when death shall take him. He is very rich, and the woman of the place will talk if he is laid out without a pall. This was what she said, and we assented, whereon we could see her working on her great web all day long. But at night she would unpick the stitches again by torchlight. She fooled us in this way for 3 years, and we never found her out. But as time wore on, and now she was in her 4th year, one of her maids, who knew what she was doing, told us, and we caught her in the act of undoing her work, so she had to finish it whether she would or no. The suitors, therefore, make you this answer that both you and the Achaeans may understand. Send your mother away and bid her marry the man of her own and of her father's choice, for I do not know what will happen if she goes on plaguing us much longer with the airs she gives herself on the score of the accomplishments Minerva has taught her, and because she is so clever. We never yet heard of such a woman. We know all about Tyro, Alcmena, Mycene, and the famous women of old, but they were nothing to your mother, any one of them. It was not fair of her to treat us in that way, and as long as she continues in the mind with which heaven has now endowed her, so long shall we go on eating up your estate, and I do not see why she should change, for she gets all the honor and glory, and it is you who pay for it, not she. Understand, then, that we will not go back to our lands, neither here nor elsewhere, till she has made her choice and married some one or other of us. Telemachus answered, Antinous, how can I drive the mother who bore me from my father's house? My father is abroad, and we do not know whether he is alive or dead. It will be hard on me if I have him to pay Icarius the large sum which I must give him if I insist on sending his daughter back to him. Not only will he deal rigorously with me, but heaven will also punish me, for my mother, when she leaves the house, will call on the Erinyes to avenge her. Besides, it would not be a creditable thing to do, and I will have nothing to say to it. If you choose to take offense at this, leave the house and feast elsewhere at one another's houses at your own cost and turn about. If, on the other hand, you elect to persist in sponging upon one man, heaven help me, but Jove shall reckon you in full, and when you fall in my father's house, there shall be no man to avenge you. As he spoke, Jove sent 2 eagles from the top of the mountain, and they flew on and on with the wind, sailing side by side in their own lordly flight. When they were right over the middle of the assembly, they wheeled and circled about, beating the air with their wings and glaring death into the eyes of them that were below. Then, fighting fiercely and tearing at one another, they flew off towards the right over the town. The people wondered as they saw them, and asked each other what all this might be, whereon Halitherses, who was the best prophet and reader of omens among them, spoke to them plainly and in all honesty, saying, Hear me, men of Ithaca, and I speak more particularly to the suitors, for I see mischief brewing for them. Ulysses is not going to be away much longer. Indeed, he is close at hand to deal out death and destruction, not on them alone, but on many another of us who live in Ithaca. Let us then be wise in time, and put a stop to this wickedness before he comes. Let the suitors do so of their own accord. It will be better for them, for I am not prophesying without due knowledge. Everything has happened to Ulysses as I foretold when the Argives set out for Troy, and he with them. I said that after going through much hardship and losing all his men, he should come home again in the 20th year, and that no one would know him. And now all this is coming true. Eurymachus, son of Polybus, then said, Go home, old man, and prophesy to your own children, or it may be worse for them. I can read these omens myself much better than you can. Birds are always flying about in the sunshine somewhere or other, but they seldom mean anything. Ulysses has died in a far country, and it is a pity you are not dead along with him, instead of prating here about omens and adding fuel to the anger of Telemachus, which is fierce enough as it is. I suppose you think he will give you something for your family, but I tell you, and it shall surely be, when an old man like you, who should know better, talks a young one over till he becomes troublesome, in the first place his young friend will only fare so much the worse. He will take nothing by it, for the suitors will prevent this, and in the next we will lay a heavier fine, sir, upon yourself than you will at all like paying, for it will bear hardly upon you. As for Telemachus, I warn him in the presence of you all to send his mother back to her father, who will find her a husband and provide her with all the marriage gifts so dear a daughter may expect. Till then, we shall go on harassing him with our suit, for we fear no man, and care neither for him, with all his fine speeches, nor for any fortune-telling of yours. You may preach as much as you please, but we shall only hate you the more. Hello, Frank. Welcome in. We shall go back and continue to eat up Telemachus's estate without paying him, till such a time as his mother leaves off tormenting us by keeping us day after day on the tiptoe of expectation, each vying with the other in his suit for a prize of such rare perfection. Besides, we cannot go after the other women whom we should marry in due course, but for the way in which she treats us. Then Telemachus said, Eurymachus, and you other suitors, I shall say no more, and entreat you no further, for the gods and the people of Ithaca now know my story. Give me then a ship and a crew of 20 men to take me hither and thither, and I will go to Sparta and to Pylos in quest of my father, who has so long been missing. Someone may tell me something, or, and people often hear things in this way, some heaven-sent message may direct me. If I can hear of him as alive and on his way home, I will put up with the waste you suitors will make for yet another 12 months. If, on the other hand, I hear of his death, I will return at once, celebrate his funeral rites with all due pomp, build a barrow to his memory, and make my mother marry again. With these words, he sat down, and Mentor, who had been a friend of Ulysses, and had been left in charge of everything with full authority over the servants, rose to speak. Gaze upon gilded sunless eyes. Thank you for the follow. Very cool name, by the way. He then, plainly and in all honesty, addressed them thus. Hear me, men of Ithaca. I hope that you may never have a kind and well-disposed ruler any more, nor one who will govern you equitably. I hope that all your chiefs henceforward may be cruel and unjust, for there is not one of you but has forgotten Ulysses, who ruled you as though he were your father. I am not half so angry with these suitors, for if they choose to do violence in the naughtiness of their hearts, and wager their heads that Ulysses will not return, they can take the high hand and eat up his estate. But as for you others, I am shocked at the way in which you all sit still without even trying to stop such scandalous goings-on, which you could do if you choose, for you are many, and they are few. Leocritus, son of Evenor, answered him, saying, Mentor, what folly is all this, that you should set the people to stay us? It is a hard thing for one man to fight with many about his victuals, even though Ulysses himself were to set upon us while we are feasting in his house, and do his best to oust us. His wife, who wants him back so very badly, would have small cause for rejoicing, and his blood would be upon his own head if he fought against such great odds. There is no sense in what you have been saying. Now, therefore, do you people go about your business, and let his father's old friends, Mentor and Halithersis, speed this boy on his journey, if he goes at all, which I do not think he will, for he is more likely to stay where he is till someone comes and tells him something. On this, he broke up the assembly, and every man went back to his own abode, while the suitors returned to the house of Ulysses. Then Telemachus went all alone by the seaside, washed his hands in the gray waves, and prayed to Minerva. "Hear me," he cried, "you god who visited me yesterday and bade me sail the seas in search of my father, who has so long been missing. I would obey you, but the Achaeans, and more importantly the wicked suitors, are hindering me that I cannot do so." As he thus prayed, Minerva came up close to him in the likeness and the voice of Mentor. "Telemachus," said she, "if you are made of the same stuff as your father, you will be neither fool nor coward henceforth." Aye. Looks like my internet had a little bit of an oopsie. Still, here I am. Sorry about that. Happens sometimes. Thank you, thank you. It's always funny when it happens when I'm in the middle of just really feeling the words. Still, what can you do? Yeah, of course. We do love a nice auto reconnect. Just like in Zenless, you hacked my net. But hello, Carmen, and to the bangaboo you posted. Before it massacred me. That means I'll go ahead and take it from the top of the paragraph then. Here we go. As thus he prayed, Minerva came close up to him in the likeness and with the voice of Mentor. "Telemachus," said she, "if you are made of the same stuff as your father, you will be neither fool nor coward henceforth. For Ulysses never broke his word, nor left his work half done. If then you take after him, your voyage will not be fruitless. But unless you have the blood of Ulysses and of Penelope in your veins, I see no likelihood of your succeeding. Sons are seldom as good men as their fathers. They are generally worse, not better. Still, as you are not going to be either fool or coward henceforth, and are not entirely without some share of your father's wise discernment, I look with hope upon your undertaking. But mind, you never make common cause with any of those foolish suitors, for they have neither sense nor virtue, and give no thought to death and to the doom that will shortly fall on one and all of them, so that they shall perish on the same day. As for your voyage, it shall not be long delayed, for your father was such an old friend of mine that I will find you a ship and will come with you myself. Now, however, return home and go about among the suitors. Begin getting provisions ready for your voyage. See everything well stowed, the wine in jars and the barley meal, which is the staff of life, in leathern bags, while I go around the town and beat up volunteers at once. I'm sorry. Beat up? What a translation. Anyways, while I go around the town and beat up volunteers at once. There are many ships in Ithaca, both old and new. I will run my eye over them for you, and will choose the best. We will get her ready, and will put out to sea without delay. Thus spoke Minerva, daughter of Jove, and Telemachus lost no time in doing as the goddess told him. Pretty much, Green Apple, pretty much. He went moodily home and found suitors flaying goats and singeing pigs in the outer court. Antinius came up to him at once and laughed as he took his hand in his own, saying, Telemachus, my fine fire-eater, bear no more ill blood, neither in word nor deed, but eat and drink with us as you used to do. The Achaeans will find you in everything, a ship and a picked crew to boot, so that you can set sail for Pylos at once and get news of your noble father. Antinius, answered Telemachus, I cannot eat in peace, nor take pleasure of any kind with such men as you are. Was it not enough that you should waste so much good property of mine while I was yet a boy? Now that I am older and know more about it, I am also stronger, and whether here among this people, or by going to Pylos, I will do you all the harm I can. I shall go, and my going will not be in vain, though, thanks to you suitors, I have neither ship nor crew of my own, and must be passenger, not captain. As he spoke, he snatched his hand from that of Antinius. Did it happen again? Oh, never mind. That's just stream elements saying we're good. Gotta be careful when you see those messages, goodness. Meanwhile, the others went on getting dinner ready about the buildings, jeering at him tauntingly as they did so. Telemachus, said one youngster, means to be the death of us. I suppose he thinks he can bring friends to help him from Pylos, or again from Sparta, where he seems bent on going. Or will he go to Ephyra as well, for poison to put in our wine and kill us? Another said, perhaps if Telemachus goes on board ship, he will be like his father and perish far from his friends. In this case, we should have plenty to do, for we could then divide up his property amongst us. As for the house, we can let his mother and the man he marries her have that. This was how they talked, but Telemachus went down into the lofty and spacious storeroom where his father's treasure of gold and bronze lay heaped up upon the floor, and where the linen and spare clothes were kept in open chests. Here, too, there was a store of fragrant olive oil, while casks of old, well-ripened wine, unblended and fit for a god to drink, were ranged against the wall in case Ulysses should come home again after all. The room was closed, with well-made doors opening in the middle. Moreover, the faithful old housekeeper, Euryclea, daughter of Ops, the son of Pisanor, was in charge of everything, both night and day. Telemachus called her to the storeroom and said, "Nurse, draw me off some of the best wine you have after what you are keeping for my father's own drinking, in case, poor man, he should escape death and find his way home again after all." Sorry, I dropped something. "Let me have 12 jars, and see that they all have lids, and also fill me with some well-sewn leather bags with barley meal, about 20 measures in all." I'm sorry. There have been tiny tremors happening lately, so I do have to be a bit careful when having things not secured down. Sorry. Get these things put together at once, and say nothing about it. I will take everything away this evening, as soon as my mother has gone upstairs for the night. I am going to Sparta and to Pylos to see if I can hear anything about the return of my dear father. When Euryclea heard this, she began to cry, and spoke fondly to him, saying, "My dear child, whatever can have put such notion as that into your head? Where in the world do you want to go to? You, who are the one hope of the house. Your poor father is dead and gone in some foreign country nobody knows where. And as soon as your back is turned, these wicked ones here will be scheming to get you put out of the way, and will share all your possessions among themselves. Stay where you are among your own people, and do not go wandering and warring your life out on the barren ocean." "Fear not, nurse," answered Telemachus. "My scheme is not without heaven's sanction. But swear that you will say nothing about all this to my mother till I have been away some 10 or 12 days, unless she hears of my having gone and asks you, for I do not want her to spoil her beauty by crying." The old woman swore most solemnly that she would not, and when she had completed her oath, she began drawing off the wine into jars and getting the barley meal into the bags, while Telemachus went back to the suitors. Then Minerva bethought her of another matter. She took his shape and went round the town to each one of the crew, telling them to meet at the ship by sundown. She went also to Noemon, son of Phronius, and asked him to let her have a ship, which he was very ready to do. When the sun had set and darkness was over all the land, she got the ship into the water and put all the tackle on board her that ships generally carry, and stationed her at the end of the harbor. Presently, the crew came up, and the goddess spoke encouragingly to each of them. Furthermore, she went to the house of Ulysses, and threw the suitors into a deep slumber. She caused their drink to fuddle them, and made them drop their cups from their hands, so that instead of sitting over their wine, they went back into the town to sleep, with their eyes heavy and full of drowsiness. Then she took the form and voice of Mentor, and called Telemachus to come outside. "Telemachus," said she, "the men are on board and at their oars, waiting for you to give your orders, so make haste, and let us be off." On this, she led the way, while Telemachus followed in her steps. When they got to the ship, they found the crew waiting by the waterside, and Telemachus said, "Now, my men, help me get the stores on board. They are all put together in the cloister, and my mother does not know anything about it, nor any of the maidservants, except one." With these words, he led the way, and the others followed after. When they had brought the things When they had brought the things as he told them, Telemachus went on board, Minerva going before him and taking her seat in the stern of the vessel, while Telemachus sat beside her. Then the men loosened the hawsers and took their places on the benches. What happened? By the ope. And Skinny Love Amber, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Yeah, I did that. I hit a button. Sorry. Let's see. Oh, there we are. Minerva sent them a fair wind from the west. I knew you'd be back. And by the way, will I ever do a World War storybook? You'd love to hear some. Well, I don't know if this counts, but I do have World War Z. If you have any good book recommendations, let me know in the Discord, and I'll look into it. Minerva sent them a fair wind from the west that whistled over the deep blue waves, whereon Telemachus told them to catch hold of the ropes and hoist sail, and they did as he told them. You know a good short story? Sounds good. Oh. You got me. You can't remember the name of it? That's okay. If you can think about it, then sounds good. And if not, I'll still look into it. And they did as he told them. They set the mast in its socket in the cross-plank, raised it, and made it fast with the forestays. Then they hoisted their white sails aloft with ropes of twisted oxhide. As the sail bellied out with the wind, the ship flew through the deep blue water, and the foam hissed against her bows as she sped onward. Then they made all fast throughout the ship, filled the mixing bowls to the brim, and made drink offerings to the immortal gods that are from everlasting, but more particularly to the gray-eyed daughter of Jove. Thus, then, the ship sped on her way through the watches of the night, from dark till dawn. And that is the end of Book 2 of the Odyssey. Actually, do I know of a book called The Stranger Came to Shore? I think I've heard of it before, but have not read it. It sounds interesting from just the title. That's for sure. Let's see. It does, if you remember it correctly. Let me take a look at it. Oh, my caps lock is turned on. A stranger came ashore. Oh. A Stranger Came Ashore is a 1975 young adult novel by Scottish author Molly Hunter. That sounds interesting. You finally got the ending you wanted in Homie Cypher? You can pass away now? Great job, Solar. Proud of you. A story of suspense. You don't know if that's the right one, to be honest? You read it when you were much younger. Well, maybe as I read it, it'll come back. For now, though, I'll go ahead and keep it in mind. I should really make a recommends, actually, in the Discord. Yeah. We'll make it pretty later. But it'll be there. But it involves something to do with skin. That sounds interesting. And a little scary. Sounds like it'll be a very, very fun read. Remember it being quite a horror story. I definitely don't mind reading a horror story. As long as everyone's okay with it. I think for now, though, since I do want to rest my throat a little bit more today, I'm gonna go ahead and end a bit early for tonight. But I'll make sure to drink some tea, take care of my throat, and then I'll be back tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Rest well, sweet dreams, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.